Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, kids, boys and girls, classmates, schoolmates, radio listeners, radio broadcasters, whatever you are out there. Hey, have a good Friday. It's Greg Anthony here on the Investigative Journal. And I think you're going to like this show today because all week I've been trying to... Oh, wait, let me say this. I'm so tempted to just keep talking politics as this dog and pony show, like I call it, this theatrical performance that these guys in Washington are putting out there should win a Tony Award. Yeah, what's a Tony Award? You ever been to those theater award shows? They're kind of boring, and I think this one is probably the best theater going on. It's reality theater, reality TV. It's everything you'd ever want because these guys and girls and senators and congresswomen and men and all these people in the FBI and the executive branch of our government, the judicial branch of our government, are putting on one hell of a theater performance. And what can I say but who's going to get the Tony Award for lead actor? Well, it's got to be Donald Trump. I mean, come on. He's on Twitter every day, and he's, you can't go 1 hour of the day or night without hearing his name on TV. Whether it's being used in a derogatory sense or they're lauding him as the greatest president ever. That's all you hear. So he's got to take the cake as far as the great actor he is, taking the Tony Award this year for his performance as President of the United States. Now, who's going to get the lead actress? Well, people would have to say it has to be Hillary Clinton. Post-mortem, she would get it. Even if she was dead, she would get it. Because all you hear is Clinton, 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 and you see old tapes of her from the time she was like 22 years old, screwing Bill, all the way up to she screwed the American people with her private server and giving away American secrets to China, selling uranium to Russia. I mean, what law hasn't this lady violated? And I'm telling you what, she must know something because there must not be a hell in her life because she ain't going to go anywhere, she thinks. And I guess Christians are going to say if she doesn't get her dues here, God will basically render his judgment and she will be in hell with the rest of these guys. Well, anyway, I'd like to see justice get done here, but there is no justice in the United States, is there? Come on. There isn't anything. The higher you go up into this court system, the less justice you get. And that's really true. And let me tell you a story today. Let's say this. My intention when I started the show, and 10 words into it, my whole line of thinking changed, was to talk a little bit about how church and state have meshed together since the 60s. Now, what two events in the 60s make me believe that? Well, we got the Second Vatican Council, which initiated its first meeting, October 11th, 1962. And then we have the social unrest, the revolution, anti-war 60s in the United States. And don't think these two weren't coming together for a reason. The total revolution in the Catholic Church, the total revolution in America, and I said yesterday, that's when America's the seam in this country started to rip apart, and it's getting wider and wider. The divide is wider and wider as we speak today. Nothing has changed. Same civil unrest, same church, Vatican Church, Luciferian Church, trying to bring the whole world together. under this ecumenical system, which is nothing more than a Luciferian attempt to control everybody. And they're doing it on two fronts. So we're going to talk in the second half hour. Maybe if I get a little bored here, I'll start earlier in the first half hour. So we're going to talk about October 11, 1962, the Second Vatican Council, as well as the revolution in America during the Vietnam War, and how these two work together to bring about what I call the church and state, the New World Order, where the two mesh together. And there's really going to be no difference between the church and state in America, as the Constitution will be completely void. You know, I was thinking the other day, why don't I start my show every day by singing the national anthem? Yeah, that'd be good. And then I said, no, I can't do that. It's too violent of a song. Have you ever listened to those words? It's bombs bursting. I mean, that's exactly what this country is all about, isn't it? We're a warring country. That's what we're best at. We're best at creating war. And we're best at, throwing bombs all over. How many bombs did we throw in, throw in Vietnam? Oh, my goodness. But that's what we are. We are good at getting into wars. And if you do research, you'll find that from the time, let's just start in 1776, officially, America's been at war all but 20 years since we have started this great adventure into, freedom, justice, liberty, the American way. And all but 20 years. And I imagine if we really looked hard during those 20 years, we were fighting somewheres, somehow, sometime. So 20 years out of all these years America's been here, we've been at war officially. Man, how many wars can you name? Everybody knows the big ones, 1, 2, and now, why don't we say 3, because that's going to come. And that people say that'll be the last war. Well, I don't think it's going to be the last war, maybe as America, as the U.S., the United States of America. But I'm sure they'll devise some other war after the world supposedly comes together under this ecumenical New World Order system. But how many wars can you name off? We have been at war all but 20 years of our history in America. And we're called a peaceful nation. Now what the hell, how can you do that? How can you call America a peaceful nation if we've been at war our whole existence? I don't get it. Well, people will say, you got to fight for freedom to keep it. Really, but we've never fought for freedom. We fought for other reasons that we've gone into on this show. Money, power, and basically slaughtering people because, we can't have too many people on earth here. It's crowded as it is, the elite will tell us. So, I said, well, I can't if I want to start my show with the national anthem every day, I don't want to do that because it's a very violent song. Bombs bursting, all these things flying. It's a terrible song, really, when you think about it. It's got a nice little beat and a nice rhythm, but the words are terrible. So what would you start it out with? Let's see. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. Change that to our song? That would be kind of hypocritical. Because America doesn't spread love. It spreads a lot of dollars all over the world so that people can get involved in money laundering, drug dealing, and what is America known for, really? All the people in the world, I don't quite understand this. Why do people really want to come here? Think about it. When you look at what we do, okay, you're going to talk to people who are trying, the left now, even the millenniums. Every millennium New World Order person out there is going, America sucks. Look at what we've done. We go into countries, we kill people. We take over countries. We're at war all the time. We don't care about the poor. We're allowing Africa just to die away. We spread all these diseases. We are terrible. And the question I have is then why does the left and these people really want open borders? They want everybody to come to this rotten nation? Doesn't make sense. And when you think about it, think of people out there all over the world. They all want to come here. Why? I just told you what most, half the country thinks it sucks. And it's the worst place on earth because we're hypocritical, we kill people, we've been at war for every bit of our existence except for 20 years. And there's nothing but racial strife here. There's nothing but problems. And then again, you go through Europe. In America, when I was there, the idea was that the European people are a little bit smarter than Americans. Americans are looked at as dummies who walk around with Levi's and drinking beer and getting fat bellies. So my point is, why do people want to come here? I think it's because America does one thing really well. They have a great PR program. We are the best marketers of a free country that isn't free, of a peaceful country that isn't peaceful, of a country of land of opportunity where there's really no opportunity. You're going to make a few bucks washing dishes. You're going to get a job doing something for low pay because, the rents are out of control. What's the difference? If you make $10 an hour here, you're going to live better. If you make 1,500 pesos, you'll live better in Mexico if you make 1,700 pesos a week. Figure out the math. That's my only conclusion, is that we are the best PR. We have the best PR bullshit program known to man. We can sell anything here. We can sell this country as being the greatest place ever devised by the human mind. The greatest place ever devised in the history of the world. But when you talk to everybody here, at least half the country, they think it's the worst country that ever was founded. Because of our hypocrisy, because we're a killing nation, a warring nation. We don't care about race. We don't care about anything. We hate anybody who comes in here, and we consider them only valuable if they go to the fields and pick our plants. If you think about it, I can't really understand why people even want to come here. And the only thing I can come up with, like I said, is we have a great marketing program, a great PR program. Because if you go overseas, and if you go I bet you go anywhere in the world, you're going to see America on TV depicted as one of the coolest places ever to be in the world. Right? And every ad you see will be like, God, go there and make yourself $1 million. Go to America, you become president. Well, you can become president even if the Constitution says you have to be born here. We already have one that did that. That's Barack Obama. He wasn't born here and he became president. So why can't you, if you live in Nairobi, come here and be president? All you got to do is fake your birth certificate. There's a lot of ways to cheat in our system. And the best cheaters in this system always are the most powerful people in the world. Yeah, the best cheaters, the best liars, the best killers, the best bullshitters are the people who are successful in America. So, if you have a child and you're living somewhere like France and you want to come to America because you can't stand Macron, your president, or if you're living somewhere way out of the realm of normalcy like Rhodesia or something, and you want to come here, teach your son or daughter to be criminals, because then you will fit in America perfectly. You'll know how to cheat, you'll know how to lie, you'll know how to steal, you'll know how to get around the system and become famous, successful, and that is America. And it's basically what you won't hear because we have a great marketing program here. And that's all I want to say about the state, the United States of America. Why I don't want to use the national anthem as my opening song every day. Why it's too violent. So think of one. I can't think of one song that fits this country outside of, I'll leave that up to you, my listeners. You give me a song to open up this show that really depicts what America's really about. Okay. So what was I going to talk about? I thought I'd go the full... why don't I get a few words in about the lead actor that's going to win the Tony Award this year, Donald Trump. This is an amazing display of political theater that I've ever seen in my life, and that's why this should go down as the greatest theatrical performance in the history of mankind. The Trump presidency and all its detractors. It's an amazing story. Every day you can find something that will keep you from really thinking about important things. They have you just going around in circles, and that's why I call it a dog and pony show. Even dogs don't want to listen to this. Ponies will run. any animal that's got any kind of smarts is not going to get close to this political theater. Is not even going to buy a ticket like we do. You know, we don't even buy a ticket. We sit there willingly. You know, if they sold one, I think people would pay. Well, look at all these people that go to his rallies. You believe that? He goes somewhere and there's 100,000 people that want to go see him speak. Why? Because he is one of the world's greatest bullshitters ever known to man. That's why he's going to win the Tony Award. And if you follow this whole thing, this Democratic-Republican fiasco going on, all the craziness that you hear from senators and congressmen and Trump and the executive branch, slinging words and always at each other's throats, it's an amazing thing. Remember the one day, the only thing you could hear on the news is that anybody in the Trump administration should not go to restaurants in public because you're not wanted here in America, and that came from a United States Congresswoman. I mean, give me a break. I mean, what does she think the American people are really interested in? She knows. Most of the American people love this. They don't want to know about, how they can improve their educational systems. They don't want to know about how they can improve their infrastructure, how we can actually, have an updated electrical grid in our country, or do some things that are really important. No, they don't want to do that. They just want to listen to mudslinging. They want to listen to Trump go after the Democrats, and the Democrats go after Trump. And this is going ad nauseum every day, everything. We have the FBI now exposed as corrupt. We have the Justice Department at the highest levels exposed as corrupt. And like I said yesterday, they're doing it on purpose. This is a written script, just like you'd see in Hollywood or on Broadway. Written, they write it every, I don't know how far in advance, maybe it's a sitcom. How many, with a daily show every day, how many should they put on? 365 a year. And now we're into the third year of this if you count his, when he was running for president in his campaign. So they're going on their third year, and this is scheduled to be at least a 4-year, maybe they know it's going to be an 8-year run. I mean, they won't outdo The Simpsons, because The Simpsons are really, they know something. It's being written in advance. So watch The Simpsons, and you'll see if Trump is going to win the next election in 2020. I'm sure they've already told us, because somebody out there. I'm going to look for that. Is Trump going to win the presidency in 2020? Just go to The Simpsons, and you'll find out. So we have this craziness going on in Washington, and it's just what the American people love. And they know that. And so they keep giving you more. It's kind of like me. Netflix, okay, let's talk about that. I'm probably one of the biggest admirers of all of these. They put on these drug lord shows like El Chapo, Pablo Escobar, and I've advanced from loving the mafia shows to now loving these drug shows. They have on there all of these. I mean, they go in from the FBI point of view, all this stuff. They don't have one yet about the Vatican and the Jesuits' role in this. I wish I should write one, I should write one of them, But, I get captivated. I watch how many segments? I think Pablo Escobar had 36. I watched all of those. I just finished 34 with El Chapo. And you probably say, well, Greg, you got better things to do with your life. Oh, really? What do I got to do? Tell me. I want to sit down every evening and watch what really America and Mexico and everybody's really all about. This is what it's really all about. A great story for you. There's a guy I just talked to that bought a house in Baja. Okay? Bought a house in Baja. Sold it to a guy in a gang called the Mongols. Okay, they're like the Hells Angels. They go across the border back and forth. The guy bought it, and they like to come over here and shoot firecrackers in Mexico, in Baja. Even though it's illegal, they got stores that say, buy firecrackers. I guess they think they can get away with it if it's in English. But underneath, it's whatever the Spanish word is. So I guess the police allow it. But they didn't allow it in this one case. So this guy buys a $200,000 house here. Where he got the money, I don't know. I'm not going to question. And he had a big party. He bought this place. It was a 3-story place so that Mongols could come across the border from Chula Vista and San Diego to party in Baja. Okay? On the beach. Where can you get a beachfront place for $200,000 and, come and blow firecrackers off? And that's what they were doing. Partying, throwing firecrackers, etc., etc. So, the guy just buys the house, and he's crossing the border on his motorcycle, and guess what? The Border Patrol, they have records of every time you pass. You can go in there, and if you go through, they'll know every time you go through the border. They got you down, okay? So, they know he's a Mongol. He's probably got a couple priors, so they keep an eye on him. So they check out his motorcycle, and he had 2 little firecrackers in there. Okay? He forgot to take them out. I mean, not big ones. They call them angel tips or something. Guess what they did? They charged him with a felony for carrying explosive weapons across the border. Apparently, he had 2 prior small felonies. Small meaning drug offenses. Nothing, I don't even think they were trafficking. And so now, according to the Third Strike Law, this happened 10 years ago. I don't know if the law's been amended. But according to that, he was, with his felony now, he's looking at a life sentence. So they put him in jail for 9 months. And guess what? They said, well, you've been here long enough, let's do a plea deal. Let's bring it down to a misdemeanor. And he signs it but doesn't read it. And he's trying to cross the border again, but he looks at his papers, and it says, you're on parole for life. So he's got to check in with the parole officer every month for life. He can't leave California. He can't cross the border, ever leave anywhere. So he's a prisoner in his own state. Okay, for what? Blowing off a firecracker in Mexico. You know how many people blow off firecrackers here? They all should be in jail. Right? According to the Border Patrol. I mean, they're really doing their job, aren't they? Probably, 5 miles over, you got a couple border cops and the FBI allowing the big cartels to push in about $30 million worth of heroin, and they can all profit, turn their back on it, while they pull a guy here who's driving a motorcycle for carrying, what? 2 little firecrackers. That's our justice system. That's it all in a nutshell. They're going to hassle you to cross the border, to get on an airplane. Take your shoes off to get on an airplane. Who the hell would want to smell my feet? But they do. It's crazy. And it's going to get worse. They're going to harass the innocent while they go to the bank. The criminals are money laundering while they're passing drugs all the way across the border in big lump sums. And they're looking for the guy who has a little bit of medical marijuana. And if you come into Mexico, you're going to see a little sign that says, medical marijuana not prohibited, or prohibited in Mexico. That's a lie. Check the Mexican laws. They just passed medical marijuana here. So why is the border doing that? And they're going to look for some, lady with cataracts that's 70 years old, that's carrying a little bit, she forgets, puts it in her glove compartment, and they're going to stop her and put her in jail for a while the big drug lords go scot-free. That's great America, right? Back in 3 minutes on Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today. so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, back for the second half hour, the last half hour this week, Friday. So it should be a good half hour, shouldn't it? Before I talk a little bit about Vatican II and the social revolution of the 60s in the United States and how the two are interconnected, I always try to find a book every now and then that maybe you haven't heard of, maybe you have. But this book is interesting because it's called The Permanent Instruction of the Alta Vendita. And few Catholics really, and anyone, really know of the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita. It's a secret document supposedly written in the 19th century that mapped out a blueprint for the subversion of the Catholic Church. Now this is interesting, and I have a little bit different take on it, and I'll give it to you in a minute. But the Alta Vendita was the highest lodge of the Carbonari, and it was an Italian secret society with links to Freemasonry, and which, along with Freemasonry, was condemned publicly by the Church. Now, Father E. Cahill, S.J., Jesuit, in his book, Freemasonry and the Anti-Christian Movement, states that the Alta Vendita was, quote, commonly supposed to have been, at the time, the governing center of the European Freemasonry. The Carbonari were most active in Italy and France. Now, in this book, in a book called the Alphathenius and the Church of Our Time, Bishop Rudolf Graber quoted a Freemason who declared that, quote, the goal of Freemasonry is no longer the destruction of the Church, but to make use of it by infiltrating it. Okay, let's just think about what we just said. Today, even in certain circles, in the alternative media, i.e. InfoWars and Alex Jones, they're claiming that there's a certain evil section of the Vatican that's been infiltrated and trying to overthrow the good church. Now, you're going to see that in Dan Brown's books, Angels and Demons, etc., etc. And so this book kind of talks about the same thing. But I take a little bit of different take on it. Now, we know that the church outwardly condemns Freemasonry. But we know that many of the high-level people in the church were involved in Freemasonry. And that came to light in the 80s when the French and Italian newspapers came up with articles showing that over 150 cardinals and bishops were actively involved in the P2 Lodge, Masonic Lodge, in Italy. Now, we also know, if you look deeply into the roots of Freemasonry, that the Jesuits really have infiltrated Freemasonry. And so they play this game on the outward side that Freemasonry is opposed to the Vatican and the Vatican is opposed to Freemasonry, when in fact they work together. It's the same Hegelian dialectic. So when I look at this book, the missing chapters are going to be how the Jesuits are involved in Freemasonry and how they are pushing this agenda. And the agenda basically is to not only infiltrate, but to destroy the church and create another one world religion. And that's what they're working on. That's what this whole thing about. That's what Vatican II was about. And they have to use both the spiritual and the secular to get their way, don't they? Now, okay, so we look at Vatican II, and we see that, what its attempt to do was to change Catholicism, to basically split it apart. And that's what it's really done, hasn't it? Is you got the old Catholics, the new Catholics. But let me give you just a brief rundown on what was going on. In January 1959, and Pope John XXIII and 18 cardinals met for a service at Rome's Basilica of St. Paul, outside the walls, to conclude the octave of prayer for Christian unity. In a brief address, the Pope announced that he intended to summon an ecumenical council, and that was kind of what he called a global church council, to begin to reinterpret the vision of the Catholic Church during the 60s. Okay. And that's exactly what was going on. Now, I said it formally opened up on October 11, 1962, the Second Vatican Council. Okay, the council became ideally known for its renewal of Catholic doctrine in a modern timeline and perspective. They met in 4 sessions from 62 to 65 and produced 16 documents. Each one was a treaty, a manifesto, setting out the Church's thinking and future direction in a specific area. Several institutional changes resulted. Now, we can go through each one of them, but they pissed off a lot of people because they were looking at the Church changing. And even the Jesuits, who were behind it all, I believe, Jesuit priest Gerald O'Connor said that the pre-council church was frozen in a time warp. We have to be open to a global church that accepts all faiths and religions. And so what they were doing is disrupting what the Catholic Church had been for centuries, correct? And the Jesuits are right there from the beginning. How about, thanks to Jesuit priest Joseph Guilleneau, the change of liturgical music from the Gregorian chants to the 1960 folk songs came into being? How come the Jesuits are always around? Because that's what they do. So here we have, I mentioned that book, The Permanent Instruction of the Alta Vendita. And it's just an amazing document, and it was originally, like I said, go find it, published in the 19th century. But don't make the mistake of thinking that the Freemasons and the Vatican are opposed to each other. On the surface they are, but not behind the scenes. Well, what about these revolutions of the 60s? Drugs, sex, rock and roll in America. Boy, I lived right through that. Not participating in a lot of it, of course, but perfectly coinciding with the beginning and the end of the Second Vatican Council revolution, we'll call it, right? It was a revolution in the church. Was the world's revolution of the 60s. Now, this didn't just happen in America. What about the British invasion of the Beatles? Remember all of this stuff. The 60s, rock and roll revolution, feminism revolution, the gay revolution, sexual revolution. Now we got the transgender revolution. How many more social changes are we going to have? And this coincides with all the changes that are going on in the church. The world's revolution. We have traditional modes of authority revolution, drug revolution. And what is it really known as? The counterculture. It brought about the birth of further sub-branches which reached us, all the way till today. Now, the church changes. Society's rebellion explodes, and it found a wide freeway towards immorality, sex, drugs, rock, feminism, homosexuality, materialism, and social chaos, all this stuff working together. Now, I was lucky enough to find this particular connection on a place called the Wild Voice, and it's kind of interesting, and I'm paraphrasing a lot of what they are talking about, and it really makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking about bringing this together on the last day, because I've been talking all week about showing you how church and state, although it appears they're separate, are working together. And the Jesuits are that link, that connection. Because a lot of them, you don't even know where they're at. I mean, they don't wear a collar. They don't wear, they're architects, they're astrologers, they work in, they're in NASA, they're lawyers. And am I exaggerating? Well, remember my friend Tupper Saucy, who passed away, who wrote Rulers of Evil? When they tried to put him in jail, and I'll make this short because I've talked about it many times, he found out the prosecutor was a Jesuit. Interesting, right? So, back to Wild Voice here. They're saying that these revolutions had led to today's hypocritical liberalism, used by governments to control the freedom of citizens through the gradual destruction of the nation's constitutions. Now think about that. It's exactly what's happening here in America. An example is, they say, the boycotting that gay lobbies constantly create on people and companies who peacefully express their opinion on homosexuality in accordance with the First Amendment of the Constitution, which grants the absolute right to what? Freedom of speech and opinion. And it's no secret that the World Revolution and the Church Revolution were not didn't begin at the same time. It's no coincidence. And the Masonic lobbies penetrating with the Jesuits and reinforcing their positions within the church, the media and governments worked as a team. So you're seeing the media, the church, the government working as a team for what? Let's look at some of the things they all do together. The erosion of morality by freeing society from strict laws of the Bible. Okay? The watering down of Christ's teaching by uniting religious creeds. Right? The brainwashing of every level of society through music, movies, television, radio, magazines, newspapers, and other media outlets. The erasure of social boundaries achieved through the use of propaganda in the name of human rights and intolerance in regards to women, homosexuality, women's emancipation, and the right to vote, divorce, and much more. The rebellion against social, political, and religious authority in the name of anarchy. The destruction of society at its roots, at its family roots. That's what's going on. Through the promotion of divorce, women's emancipation, abortions as a woman's right, premarital sex, and the single motherhood. Why are you seeing the explosion of single motherhood? The erosion of the family. It happens all right to really good people. But by the end of the Vatican Council in 1965, the world was just beginning to tilt on its axis, to tilt in this direction. It was just starting then, and it's really moving into full swing right now. Now, they were during this period of time, both the elites in the church and in the secular world were planning for huge social changes. And many of them began in the States and just filtered all throughout the world, right? Because America, like I said in the first half of my show, is the best marketing country in the world. Bring it here, and our marketing people will turn it into something the whole world will follow. Kind of like when you go overseas and everybody started wearing blue jeans, you know? Where'd it come from? America. It's got to be good. The social changes were just beginning to be, to be huge. The explosion of the sexual revolution. The shifting of a focus from community to individualism. From, forgetting about nationalism, community. They wanted to create an individual who was a god, who then could spread this godlike world all over, so that you would have one world. That's what their goal was. The different attitude towards authority and the gay liberation movement. It's secret or conspiracy that the media played a huge role in controlling the globe's, the population of this world. Now, just to get a quote from even Wikipedia says something. It says TV, the news mass communication device of the age, along with other media outlets such as radio and magazines, could broadcast information in a matter of seconds to millions of people, while only a few wealthy people would control what millions could watch. That's what's going on. What do you think they love the internet for? You can spread something quickly to millions of people and unite them under any kind of cause that's either good or bad. And controlling your thinking process, controlling where they want to move the masses. That's what they're doing with it. Oh, of course, they allow a few nutty people to get on like me and try to get and break through that. They don't care. I mean, if you got 20 million viewers, they may. But that's the way they operate. It's a numbers game. Now, the struggles on all the rhetorical confrontations that are occurring between ordinary people in a way that never been before. The sense of involvement in a social, sexual shift happening in the present could rapidly win new converts and spread throughout the world, which it has. Now, the counterculture that began in the 60s here was becoming almost normal now, and by the use of the American media, our marketing programs, our newspapers, our TV, books are being written on this subject, and really what it's doing is leading us all into a one-world government and a one-world religion that people will accept. So, let's look. We know the use of drugs just exploded in the 60s, didn't it? And we could go over statistic after statistic, but I'm not going to do that. But if we look, heroin, cocaine, marijuana, LSD became entwined with this new vision of human sexuality as a means to societal and personal freedom. And even the spiritualism descended from, remember we've talked about Helena Petrova Blavatsky? Sex and drugs were promoted through music. And this Russian occultist, if you read some of her works, is a very, very well-known occultist in this country. And the elitists are using a lot of her philosophies and the mentality of breaking down a society through the promotion of sex and drugs, music, both directly and indirectly. Okay? This revolution brought a new wave of thoughts, philosophies, mentalities that was breaking from the traditional and the religious. They spoke about drugs, sex, although not always openly. In the 1960s, do your own thing became a common expression. It meant to do whatever you wanted without feeling guilty, right? Do what thou wilt. And that's that kind of expression of be your own God, right? Such expression came from a man who proclaimed himself to be the B666, and whose name was who? None other than Aleister Crowley. And we've talked about him many times. So we got Crowley, we got Helena Blavatsky, we got this sexual drug movement moving through the social area, while at the same time Vatican II was creating a religious, spiritual revolution. And like I said, this was no coincidence. Now, we talked about Crowley. He was a British Satanist and Freemason, very influential to many of our world leaders today, if they tell the truth. Now, he was a devotee of the triangle as a symbol. Now, why is the triangle on our dollar bill with the all-seeing eye? As a high-level officer of the occult Order of the Golden Dawn, Crowley used one of his emblems, the Eye of Horus in the Pyramid of Fire, radiated by the sun's rays, which you can find on many of our government buildings. You can find it on our dollar bills. Why? Because this is the movement of the one world government, one world religion coming. Even bands like the Beatles followed Crowley's occult theories. Yes, I don't want to warp any of your Beatle fans' ideas, but Crowley's occult theories contributed to the spread of the new ways hidden behind the mask of freedom, peace, and love. Interesting. Now, what about this counterculture movement planned by the sects within the churches, including the Vatican, and within the secular worlds at the same time? Let me quote you something here from this article on a place called The Wild Voice. And I'm going to quote this because it's good. It says, many hippies rejected mainstream organized religion in favor of a more personal spiritual experience, often drawing in indigenous and folk beliefs. If they adhered to mainstream faiths, hippies were likely to embrace Buddhism, Unitarian Universalism, Hinduism, and the restorationalist Christianity of the Jesus movement. Some hippies did embrace neo-paganism, especially Wicca and New Age. To see more on New Age movement, you got to look and see, I always say this, who created the New Age movement? Okay, that's your homework, because I've told you many times it was a Jesuit priest. And he was, I won't give you his name because I want you to do a little homework, he was the mentor of none other than Hillary Clinton. Now, in this book, Hippies and American Values in 1991, Timothy Miller described the hippie ethos as essentially a religious movement, which goal was to transcend the limitations of the mainstream religious institution, something the Jesuits loved. They don't care if you're an atheist. They don't care if you're a drug addict. They just don't want you to get in their way. And what gets in their way? Anything that does not allow the Pope of Rome to gain authority throughout the world by using his minions in government. Like many dissenting, and it says in this book, religions, the hippies were enormously hostile to the religious institutions of the dominant culture, and they tried to find new and adequate ways to do the tasks the dominant religions failed to perform. In his seminal contemporary work, The Hippie Trip, author Louis Yablonsky notes that those who were most respected in hippie settings were the spiritual leaders, the so-called high priests, who emerged during the era. One such hippie high priest was San Francisco State University professor Stephen Gaskin. Beginning in 1966, Gaskin's Monday night class eventually outgrew the lecture hall and attracted 1,500 hippie followers in an open discussion of spiritual values drawing from the Christian, Buddhist, and Hindu teachings. In 1970, Gaskin founded a Tennessee community called The Farm, and he still lists his religion as hippie. Okay? So, what am I trying to get at here real quickly? And I only have a minute or two. Is that if you want to change a culture, a country, an attitude, a religious denomination, how do you do it? You split it apart. You devise a way to present something that appears to be more dangerous than what you're doing. And then you begin to split it apart. And what they did with the Vatican II and with the social movement in America was to do just that. The people that wanted America and the Catholic Church to remain as it was were frightened by this new movement, correct? And the people that caught on to the new movement particularly didn't care for the other half of the country, right? So you split the country first, and by doing that you can create something new, a synthesis, the direction you want to go. And as we move forward now, in 2018, that's exactly what's happening. And many of the things, even 40 years ago, that were considered completely out of the cultural or social circles of normality are now normal. Transgender movements, all of these things, bathrooms that it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. In fact, the movement of gender neutrality among children, we have parents now who don't even want to admit their kids are a boy or girl. They're allowing them to decide. Enough. Have a good weekend. I'm all out of time, but I think you get where I'm coming from. Don't be divided. Don't let them do it to you. Back Monday on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.